Hi everybody, Colin Stevenson here, joined by my hero John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Today we are now at your teenage years, John. About you going in, you've been through synaptic pruning, and you're now in the kind of growing up mode on your story. We've obviously the people watching this have watched your last part of your growing up, which was more than actually fascinating. So I look forward to hearing this one, and I'm sure everyone does as well. So tell us all about it.
So what happened when I lived in Los Angeles is when I was in the fourth grade, so I was about 10 years old, my dad got called to the national headquarters in upstate New York of his company to interview for this job. He worked for Xerox. There was this machine, a 3600, that was having trouble. And they asked him to come in. He interviewed for the job. And the guy said, basically, you got the job, except on your form, you didn't write what college you went to. My dad goes, I didn't go to college. And they went, ugh. So he didn't get the job. So I stayed in Los Angeles. And then in the sixth grade, they called him back up and said, doesn't matter, come out and fix this. So basically, the person they hired to fix it couldn't fix it. And so they had him move out there. So I moved just before synaptic pruning. I moved from this warm climate where I was outside, I was in all these programs, I was doing all these things, playing guitar, doing all these, stuff. And I moved to upstate New York, the cold, the winter. I had to stop doing all of these activities, and I just synaptically pruned hard. Basically, what happened was I stopped doing all these things, and then all of a sudden, I go through synaptic pruning, and I went to the doctors a couple times for depression. And it wasn't that I was depressed, it was that I had no energy. And I couldn't understand. I look back on it now and I know what happened. That was synaptic. I know when I went through synaptic pruning, I was this hyperactive kid who all of a sudden had zero energy. And I know that was my synaptic pruning, and it just hit me hard. So I'm living in this place, going through middle school, and I'm so glad I didn't double skip. There was a thought when I was in Los Angeles that rather than go in the third grade, they were going to move me into fifth grade. That's how far ahead I was from all the students. They decided not to do it because socially I wasn't getting along with those kids. I was starting fights. And so now all of a sudden I'm in upstate New York. It's cold and I have no energy and I don't want to talk to anybody. And basically what I did was I just stayed in my room. In fact, I stopped growing. I have been this height ever since I basically was 12, 13 years old. I was the tallest kid all the time. And all of a sudden I stopped growing. Everything about me just came to a screeching halt when we moved to upstate New York.
That's so. I just wanted to skip back a little bit there. So you said that when you went through synaptic pruning, it was hard. Is that because you weren't able to be in the environment that you were always brought up in? So it wasn't comfortable.
What I mean when I said hard synaptic pruning is that I was in this environment where I was doing all these things, I was active in all these abilities, and then I moved and all that stuff got shut down. I was a kid who lived outside and did all these things. All of a sudden, all of that went away. And then when synaptic pruning happened, and remember the last episode we explained synaptic pruning, my brain cut away everything I wasn't using, and I wasn't using all of those things that I was using before. So now all of a sudden I lost all this. I lost consciously all this intelligence. I just consciously lost a lot of intelligence and I lost a lot of energy and a lot of connections. So I just basically stayed in my room. I made models. I still read a lot. I was reading Kurt Vonnegut was my favorite author at that time. And I read a lot of science fiction. When I was in California, I used to walk to the library, to the Carson Library. It was like 2.5 miles away. And I would walk there and read on the weekends when I was a kid. I still went to the library in upstate New York. I was pulling books. I was always reading. I was one of those kids that in the study halls in school, rather than goofing around, I was reading. So I still kept the reading ability. I was making models and doing stuff, but otherwise I was just shut up in my room. And the only thing I did was my dad bought a pool table, and it was a bar size pool table, a 6 foot, not one of the 8 foot. So I used to come home every day from school. I'd put a cassette tape in. I'd play pool for 45 minutes right-handed. I'd play pool for 45 minutes left-handed. And I got super, super, super good at pool.
That's awesome. Now, there was something else you said a minute ago, and that was about fighting with the kids 2 years above you and not being able to get on. And I've not been able to understand why. Can you explain why that was? If you were so advanced in terms of your knowledge, was it because you weren't old enough to understand their behavior?
So what happened was in Los Angeles, all the kids went to summer school.
Yeah.
We went to summer school every year when I was living in Los Angeles. And so I went to 5th grade summer school instead of 3rd grade summer school. And that was like the test case. And now I know a lot of these 5th graders are bullies, and they get jealous and they are insecure. And here's this 3rd grader who's smarter than them, and all they did was fight. But I have a lot of internal tension. I'd fight back.
Yeah,
And so there was just a lot of fighting and not a lot of learning. That year in summer school, everyone went, yeah, this is not going to work. So I didn't back down from a fight.
Good. Well, neither you should. Well, you kind of should now, because we understand the unconscious confrontation. So going back to this pool, did you find that was where you were able to put your focus in, and that was your release from the books and getting the knowledge?
It was a lot of modeling, because what happens on a 6-foot pool table, I used to always joke with people, they'll go, oh, well, you didn't play on an 8-foot. I could beat everybody on an 8-foot table because I was on a 6-foot. We play 8-ball, and what happens is if 2 really good players play 8-ball on a 6-foot table, the second guy always wins, because the first guy gets like 6 of his 7 balls. He can't maneuver around all the other guys' balls. It's a tight space, and the next guy runs the table. So in order to win, you had to really be strategic. So when I practiced, what I used to do was I used to call my next shot. And what I'd help people do to get better is I'd say, you're going to make this shot, but call your next shot, because it made you have to put the cue ball in a certain spot. And my modeling, I think it was just help my modeling ability. I'd look at a table and I'd go, what's the right way to get these 8 balls in? My 7 and the 8 ball have to go in this order. So I'm seeing 8 moves ahead. If you will, I'm seeing in 8 dimensions. Yep. And I got really good at just being able to clear tables left and right.
That's mega. So effectively you were looking at the next stage or the next bigger system per se, and you were working where you were working towards. And it wasn't about the here and now. It was like you were planning ahead. So that's really cool. And then now, did you find when you were playing pool that you were able to then, with the modeling, did you start to put that into your life staying in this new city?
Well, what happened was, in a way I did, because I'm starting to try to plan out the next move. And the thing that fit together with that is there was one area two areas I didn't synaptically prune hard in, and it was math and science. So they got me in to math and science. Like when I came into the school system, they didn't have me in any advanced courses. And my mom fought really hard for math and science. So I went in and had to take a couple tests, and they let me be in honors math and honors science. So when I synaptically pruned, those are the only 2 abilities I kept. So, and to a ridiculous degree, in middle school, our grades were 0 to 100, it was 100% as the highest grade. I got 116 grade in science. So I was just scoring like science, like out of this world. And math wise, I was winning these math awards. I won a national award as a junior, American Math Association award as a junior. So what happened was my math and science were super, super strong. And so I got really, really good at that. And what eventually happened was I joined, when I got to high school, I joined this math league. So I was a mathlete, my senior year. I hadn't heard about it or anything. And so what happened was, and I'm going to explain a little bit about this. So you had a team of 10 kids, but you could only have 4 from any grade. So you'd have 4 seniors, 4 juniors, and then 2 sophomores or sophomore and freshmen. And what would happen is like 600 kids would get together at this location, and they'd take these tests. And there were 6 events, and everybody had to participate in 3. And each event was a certain topic, so they would have a topic that would be like, trigonometry, or a topic that, they had different topics. and you had to place all your players to cover all of those topics. And each topic you could get 6 points. There were 3 questions, a 1, 2, and a 3-point question. So the most a person could get is 18. And what happened was the math teacher, when he saw that I was this, scored all these points and everything and won all these awards, he asked me to join the team. I had to wait for football, and we'll talk about football in a second. So I had to wait for that. I missed the first meet. I joined the second meet and we won for the first time ever. And what happened was we had this unstoppable team. Now, part of my ability is that I would take the really difficult courses. So there were these rankings, and the ranking was according to a thing called a power score. So the way to explain this is if I took this category and I got 6 out of 6 points in it, and 300 kids took it and they got 900 points. If 900 points were scored in this and I got 6, they would take the 6 divided by 900, and and I would get basically like a 0.0 whatever 15 number, and that was added to my power score. So that's how they ranked people, because they're saying if you're just getting an 18 taking the easiest and he's taking the hardest, they have no way to rank 600 kids. So what happened was I loved permutations and probabilities. Though that's the toughest math course there is. There's 14, you got 10 guys and 4 women sitting around a table. How many settings are there where there's 2 guys, 2 women sitting together? And you got to come up with all the stuff. I took permutation probability at one of the courses. There was 5 total points scored, and I had 3 of them. So if you think about it, out of 300 kids taking this test, I got the 1 point and the 2 point right, and 2 other people out of 300 got the 1 point right. So my power score was 0.6 just from that. Everybody else is dealing with 0.01. I shot up to number 1, and I finished the year like number 3 overall for the entire county. So it was one of these things where it was like we ended up winning. Our school won for the first time ever this championship. There were 5 of us that went to this regional final. We went to the states, then we went to the region, we went to the University of Maryland. I was in this room with all these people who were all going to MIT and Harvard and all Princeton. I was in this room with all these just math geniuses, and we progressed our way through. The 5 of us who made the all-star team and kept progressing, these guys all did amazing things. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of people would say I was the worst in the group, because these 5 guys, one's this heart surgeon that did experimental heart surgery. One of the guys is the guy who invented the scanning when you scan at the supermarket. Like these guys all did these amazing things. And what did I do? Well, you'll find out. I made dishwashing liquid, so what? So I was the least of these guys, but basically what happened was I was this guy who had all this math ability. And then the final thing I did was, and I learned about fractals at the nationals. I've talked to some people. That's the first time I learned about fractals. And I was like, this is important. I'm going to learn about fractals. But the other thing I did was I learned how to do computer programming. And so a lot of time I had a best friend. He actually went to Rice University, and he was one of the 10 guys who did the greatest practical joke ever at a university. They took this many-ton statue and flipped it around 180 degrees and broke everything down, an engineering feat. And then he became a product development vice president or whatever for eBay when that first started. So he was my best friend, and he would come over and we'd stay up all night writing this program to make this football game, basically from computer programming. So a lot of my time was just spent, basically by myself or with my best friend, who was this other guy who was a genius. And we were just doing programming, doing math and science.
And it's mad that one of those 5 people that you speak about came up with the only model in the world for the mind and brain as well. I mean, you say that the dishwasher is the least, and then somebody does pull something like that out of the bag, for me is absolutely crazy. So America is different to the UK to Scotland. So what we see is we'll go through, but we will get graded differently. The way of learning is differently. What we find here and what I find is that the parents are involved quite a lot in America, encouraging them, pushing them to go more and more and more. Now, how was your relationship? Obviously, I understand your relationship from your last video with your mom and your dad and things like that. How was it for, in terms of when you were going through these tests and these, these kind of big awards and things like that?
Yeah. So what happened was my dad, who was a teacher perceiver, he had worked his way up in his company, he developed this thing. They started promoting him to management and he hated it. And my dad started hating his job. And in a lot of ways, it made me a modeler because my dad would come home and I don't know if he's happy or really, really upset. And so I had to figure it out. But teacher perceiver, he never gives the why. He just makes a statement, like we say, like Sherlock Holmes. And then if you don't get the why right, you're an idiot. And if you state the why, you're an idiot. You have to state another perceiver point to prove you got the why. And it was almost like a survival mechanism. So I started learning how to quickly model very quickly. And he was so depressed. You look back at that time, my mom was loving life. My mom was in a volleyball league, a bowling league. We were in a development at a pool. She's down at the pool. She, she was doing all these things. And my dad came home one time and said, you need to get a job. Basically, I'm miserable and you need to be miserable too. Now, what's the worst thing to do to a giver server? So she gets out of the house, she gets a job. She's loving her job. She's hanging around people. She's doing stuff. She's twice as happy now, which made him twice as upset. So it was really one of these things where I just really couldn't wait to get out of the house because there was a lot of stress because you have this giver server who's just, everything's wonderful, for her. And you have this, teacher perceiver, everything's miserable. And he's kind of the guy I looked up to. So to try to interact with him, but he's miserable. And then you got to model and you got to model quickly. And I got really quick. I took a math final. And everything I would do in half the time. I took a math final in half the time. But what happened was the teacher had told everybody, we were taking the gymnasium, that it was a 3-hour test. And then when it was an hour and a half in, he goes, you got a half hour more. I was already done with the test. And everybody goes, I thought we had 3 hours. And they, yelling, screaming, crying. He goes, it's a 2-hour test. And they spent, my grade was like, 90 whatever. And like, I don't think anybody else in the class got like above a 70 on the final. So that's where I started. A lot of what I was dealing with at home was like from survival. I have to model quickly. And so all of this stuff just made me this amazing modeler. But the one thing that kind of got me out of there was that in 8th grade, I was a very good football player. I was a very good athlete, like we talked about. And in California, I played flag football. I didn't play tackle. And so when I was in middle school in 8th grade, there was a flag football intramural and I wanted to play. And so I played. And what happened was I started scoring touchdowns left and right. And they would make these announcements on who scored all the touchdowns and they kept track of it. And it was me and another guy who were leading the league in touchdowns. And what happened was I ended up leading the league in touchdowns that year in intramurals. And the 9th grade coach came up to me and said, hey, I want you to play football, tackle. And I'm like, tackle. So he had me play football. And what happened was I had the best hands. He told me, I made some catches that people couldn't believe. And I had very good hands. And he told me, you have the best hands I've ever seen of anybody in my life. And so I started playing football and I went to these camps. Now our high school had a graduating class of 760, it's a very big school. And I'd go to these football camps in the summer where you stay for a week offsite and there'd be like 4 or 5 other schools, big schools that would come. My junior year, there were 4 awards: most outstanding defensive back, most outstanding defensive line, offensive back, offensive line. As a junior, I won the most outstanding defensive back out of anybody. The other 3 were all given to seniors, basically. And then my senior year, I won the most valuable player at the camp. And so what happened was I was doing all these great things in the football field. They put me in to score a touchdown and take me off because it was so political. Like my parents were in the boosters club. So they wouldn't play me. They'd play me if they needed to win, but our team was really good. But otherwise, they were keeping parents happy with boosters clubs and everything. And so what happened was I actually was going to transfer. My my ninth grade coach became the varsity coach at another school. And I almost transferred high schools to go play football. That's how important football was to me. And honestly, if I had played football in college, I know I would have taken steroids. To us, they all called them vitamins back then. And I would have done anything to play football.
Yeah.
But what happened was kind of like my football career kind of died because of these political issues. And so again, I played football, and then all of a sudden I got on the math team.
So do you find that you got back into football, it takes you kind of back to your childhood that you lost with the synaptic pruning, because you didn't have that? You went to math and science, and you didn't have the freedom and the football and the modelling on the other side. So do you feel that started opening up different pathways in your brain?
Right. And so I'm wearing this jersey, number 8. My player when I was young was Archie Manning. He played at the University of, or he played at Ole Miss, Mississippi, which I was born in Mississippi. He played with a broken arm in college. And I remember watching him as a kid. And then what happened was my parents bought me a jersey, not this one, but a polyester one that fit me when I was 13. It was my favorite shirt. And so my favorite shirt was Archie Manning. Not many people knew him. Now they know him as the father of Eli and Peyton Manning. He has 2 sons who both won 2 Super Bowls. But whenever I'd wear this shirt, and once in a while someone would go, Arch, because his name was Archie Manning, it'd be like somebody knew him. But so that's why I wore this shirt. It's like football was the one thing that was like, this was my childhood. 9 months a year, I played outside. I played football with people, and I just loved football so much. And that was the only thing that kind of brought me out of my shell until the end of my junior year, when I was trying to get in the National Honor Society. They said I didn't have enough, activities. So I went out for the play. And I got a part in the play. And what happened was this director, who ended up becoming a legend, it was her first play at our school. And she did the play JB by Archibald MacLeish, which is ridiculous. It's the story of Job. And it's like no high school would ever do that play. And she did it as her first play. And so what happened was I fell into a group of people who didn't like to be in the other cliques. It was a clique of people who didn't like cliques. They were all very well read, very intelligent. None of them were scientists, basically. And so what happened for my very first play was there was 2 main characters, the God and the Satan character in JB. Were both fighting over who got top billing, and she wanted someone else to be like, get the top billing. And when we were doing rehearsals, I was sitting on the set reading a newspaper, and they started the play and I didn't know it. I was reading a newspaper, and in the middle of their starting, the one character looked and said, "Hey, get off the stage." And I looked up, looked afraid, and ran off. And the director said, "Leave that in. We're going to put that in. You're going to be on stage, and that's what's going to happen. Like, we're going to improv this whole thing. You're going to be on stage." Again, because I was just a reader and everything. And so what happened was she saw me juggling. So I had taught myself, one of the things I'd done was I taught myself to juggle, being bored, being inside, I taught myself to juggle. She goes, "I want you to work that in." Then she saw me, whistling, singing in the rain, and kind of dancing with one of the characters. She's like, "Put that in." She kept saying, "Put all these things in." So what happened was, by the time this play started, this is my first play I'm ever in. The way the play starts, because it's really these 2 characters saying, let's put on a play on this stage where it's God and Satan, and we're going to do these things to JB, who's Job. And so what happens is, the way the play starts is I come with a newspaper under my hand, it's kind of dancing and whistling, singing in the rain. I go to sit down, and I pull out of my pocket mints. Now, they were little marshmallows. And I'd pull one mint out and look and go to put it in. I'd stop, and I'd pull 3 out. I'd put it away, and I would juggle all 3 mints, throw one up in the air, catch the other 2, catch it in my mouth. Then I'd take the other 2, juggle it, throw one up in the air, catch it in my mouth. Then I'd go to put this in my mouth, and instead I'd throw it behind my back, catch it in my mouth, and sit down. So every time we did it in rehearsal, I never got all 3, ever. We had 3 performances. I went 3 for 3. So that's one of the things is I learned about this flow thing. Like, when it really matters, like there's something about me that when it really matters, I can do it. And when it doesn't matter, I could never do it. But all 3 performances, nailed it. I'd hold the paper up and all the adrenaline, just shaking. But it was just like, Bam. And so what happened was I got in with this group. My administrator kicked in. This director wanted to get a lot more kids involved in the plays, realized a lot of them couldn't read. She asked me to create a play.
Nice.
So what happened was I found a friend of mine who could write. And what we did was the play was called The Quest. So we were big Monty Pythons and Holy Grail fans. So we took Monty Python and the Holy Grail and The Wizard of Oz, because The Wiz was on Broadway at the time, and we put it into the Twilight Zone. And I had a friend of mine write the whole thing up. We put the play on during 3 lunch periods. I could tell stories all day about that. Hilarious. And it led to all these people getting involved. The drama club exploded. We've had Oscar-winning actor from that drama club. Just amazing legacy of a drama club. And I feel like I administrated that whole thing. Everybody said, yeah, I was the unofficial, president of a drama club, but it led to all these friends of mine, that really kind of changed my life, because I got involved with a lot of very well-read, very intelligent people.
I think, yeah, and I think you were one of those yourself. So you get involved in yourself because you knew your abilities and you used them quite a lot as well. Now, did you feel that allowed you to have more expression? And again, so you've now got the science, you've got the math, you've got yourself back out, you've been playing football, you've opened up your brain that bit more. You've then pushed yourself into something else that you didn't expect, which has allowed you to produce more brain power as such.
I think so, because I think it really led to the flow stuff. I think she taught me things, this director taught me things that really I still use today for flow and improv and things like that. But if you think about it, I'm a mathlete who's playing football, who's acting in plays. So I don't know how many people do all those things. So that's what I was doing. Now, these friends were all Ivy League people. They're all going to Ivy League schools. So it came time to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And so I will tell you, I took one of these tests to figure it out, early on, like sophomore, junior year, and it came back dentist. I would fit a dentist almost like 98%. A lot of math, a lot of science, a lot of working with my hands, a lot of challenges, a lot of different things, a lot of problem solving. Fit me perfectly. So I started taking these classes and going to these groups. And the minute I found out that there was going to be blood, I can't stand the sight of blood. It makes me pass out. So it was like, I couldn't do that. So the next thing I wanted to do was I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy.
Yep.
I wanted to fly jets. I was born on an Air Force base. This was the thing I really wanted to do. I got my representative's, basically recommendation, and they sent me a booklet. And basically the way this booklet went is you go page 1 and you do what it says, page 1, page 2, tear this out and write this essay. I'm going through this booklet. I'm halfway through this booklet. I'm on my way to the Air Force Academy, doing all this stuff. And then there's the ear and eye test. And I'm like, I'm deaf in my right ear in the conference. And they had limits and everything. And I'm like, I was in a study hall when I was looking at this. I got a pass. I went down to the nurse's office. I said, can you test me in these ranges? And it was just devastating. It's just like I'm halfway through this book. I got everything lined up. And it didn't occur to me that, the thing my mom was like, this is going to keep you out of, get drafted. That was a long, but yeah, this would keep me out of the Air Force Academy, as being deaf in one ear. So I'm like, what am I going to do? All I know is I love math. I'll go teach math. And my mom said, these chemical engineers, coming out of college are making all this money. You should be a chemical engineer. And so I was like, okay. So I only applied to 3 colleges. I applied to Cornell. My girlfriend's dad was Mr. Cornell, like in the early 60s. And he was a big time executive. And he's like, you could definitely get in Cornell. So I was going to go to Cornell. I wanted to go to Princeton. That was like the school I always looked up to. And my mom said, you need like a safety school. There's this engineering college up in upstate New York, Clarkson, hockey school, hockey and engineering, in the middle of nowhere. So I applied to that. So what happened was I took I had to have an alumni interview for Cornell. So there was this guy who interviewed me, and he had only missed like 2 Cornell football games in like 30 years. One was for a funeral, one was for a wedding. And I interviewed with him, and he was like, you're in. No problem. And I was around 150 pounds at that time. He's like, Cornell has 150-pound football team. Which I didn't know. The Ivy Leagues actually have this for the scrawny nerds to play football. So I was like, I'm going to go play 150 football at Cornell. I'm in. There's no problem. So I just had to take my achievement test. So I take my achievement test. I write in the numbers, of the colleges to send them. And I get a letter from Cornell, applied and everything. And Cornell says, we didn't get your achievement test scores. So I made a copy of them. I mailed them. And like 2 weeks later, I get a letter. We still don't have your achievement test scores. So a friend of mine was looking into Cornell. I decided to drive down with him. I walked into Olean Hall. I handed my achievement test scores to them in the chemical engineering. And the woman said, it's like someone took a fire hose to our records here. It's a mess. Thank you. Princeton rejected me. I get the letter from Cornell. They rejected me. I get a call from the alumni interviewer and he goes, John, did they accept or reject you? I go, what do you mean they rejected me? Why don't you know that? He goes, next to the list, he goes, on my list, next to everybody's name I interview, it says accepted or rejected. And next year's, it says no action. They never got my achievement test scores. So I was like, you know what? Clarkson ended up accepting me. And I ended up going, you know what? I'm going to go 2 years at Clarkson, then I'm going to transfer to Cornell, because you just do your undergrad, you just do your basic courses for 2 years. And in my high school yearbook, everybody's like, go to Clarkson for 2 years and go to Cornell. We'll see you there, da, 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 da. So my whole goal was, I'm going to go to this college, Clarkson, for 2 years and then transfer to Cornell, be a chemical engineer from Cornell, and see everybody there. And so that's how I kind of, my teenage years, really, the circumstances made me a modeler. If there's so many situations that if I just chosen one other thing or gone one other way, I wouldn't have ended up this way. But the way my dad was, the way I synaptically pruned only to science and math, and I kept all that ability and I accentuated it, and I fell in with this group that were driving me this way. I was basically ready to be this world-class modeler.
That's the story itself's amazing. The model for the mind and brain, it's amazing. I would like to ask one question before we wrap this up. And the question I would like to ask was, these nerds that you met in the acting side of things, do you believe that they maybe took the rebel out of John Lenhart?
Why did you say rebel?
I've just got this feeling that I felt, when you were talking about being a child and you were 2 kind of years above, I just thought fighting, sticking up for myself. I just felt there was more fire in John Lenhart's belly than what John Lenhart's spoken about. And especially you were talking about, the fight or flight mode, and it wasn't even those words. It was more about understanding your dad coming home, survival. I just know there's more there. And I just felt I had to ask the question.
Yeah, you killed it. So what's funny about that is when we get ahead of my story, I got the nickname Johnny Rebel, or Reb, is what they called me. That's why it's funny you use that word. The acting group brought it back. They definitely brought it back, because there were things we did that were just completely rebellious. I came out of my shell completely because of these people. And yeah, there's one guy in particular who was administrator teacher, and he was outrageous. And his name was Gordy. And later in my story, I used to say WWGD. What would Gordy do? Like I started going, what would Gordy do? Because Gordy was ridiculous, just ridiculous. He would say and do whatever. And he wasn't embarrassed about anything. And I kind of watched him, and he was kind of like my mentor in a lot of ways. And later, as we get through this, that's the guy I always went back to and go, what would Gordy do? That's what I'm going to do. But yeah, you nailed it. They brought the rebel back. I became a rebel, because of the acting group.
I'm looking forward to hearing this. Thank you very much, John. And I will speak to you next week. Take it easy.
You're amazing, man. Bye.
Cheers, man. Bye.